Hello and welcome to the webinar, Always One Step Ahead with the Right Cloud Security, with Duncan Brown, Vice President of Enterprise Research Europe at IDC. Hello, Duncan. Paul Schöber, Head of Portfolio Cluster Cloud, Data and Application Security at Deutsche Telekom Security GmbH, and Thomas Rumpf, CTO Managed Infrastructure Services at T-Systems International. Hello, Paul, and hello, Thomas. My name is Philipp von Schmieding from DVR, and I'm your technical moderator today. In this role, I have a few technical notes from me on the process. The webinar will be recorded. You may have questions during the webinar. If you look at your control panel, you will see that you have the opportunity to enter your questions there. Please feel free to use this opportunity already during the webinar. The questions will be answered by the speakers in the subsequent Q&A session. If you prefer a private answer, please point this out to us. In any case, the questioner remains anonymous. During the webinar, there will be two smaller surveys or polls in which you can participate, and we would invite you to do so. Here too, you will remain anonymous. If you have any questions about the functionality of the tool during the webinar, I will be happy to answer them in writing directly. And now I look forward to an informative and interesting webinar with you, and hand over to the first speaker, Thomas Rumpf. Hello, Thomas, and good luck.
Thanks, Philip. And hello and warm welcome also from my side to everybody. As Philip said, my name is Thomas Rumpf. I'm CTO for Managed Infrastructure Services and Private Cloud with T-Systems. I have more than 25 years of experience in telecommunications and IT services. And since a couple of years, I'm fully dedicated to cloud and cloud transformation. So I'm working with many of our clients on their cloud journey, helping them to define an appropriate cloud adoption strategy. So many thanks from my side for your interest and your participation in the webinar. A little words on T-Systems. You're probably aware of. If not, T-Systems is one of the leading service providers in Europe when it comes to digital transformation, cloud, and security. We help clients to achieve their desired outcomes with a vendor-independent, fully integrated end-to-end approach. We are part of Deutsche Telekom with more than 38,000 employees worldwide, a presence in over 30 countries, and close to 7 billion euros in revenue. We are serving some of the world's leading companies for more than 25 years now. T-Systems is known for its dedication to client success, for unbeatable technology and business skills and passion and in-depth industry know-how. Our zero outage quality program that ensures uninterrupted availability of systems and infrastructure has become industry standard. And last but not least, security is in our DNA. We believe that digitization needs a holistic approach and that cloud is the foundation for it. That's why our strategy is public cloud first with hybrid as our value proposition. We offer powerful assets that come in 4 building blocks as a basis for every digital transformation. More than 4,500 of our experts help our clients modernize their application landscape and digitize their processes and business models. We are operating more than 65,000 business critical systems in the cloud for our clients worldwide, in public cloud, in private cloud, and at the edge. We have partnership contracts in place with the major public cloud providers, AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. We provide connectivity services that are the foundation for the multi and hybrid cloud world. And finally, we run Europe's largest integrated cyber defense and security operations center. Within telecom security, more than 1,500 security experts offer high-grade security knowledge and services for your cloud journey. Well, see, there are many reasons why companies move their applications and workloads to the cloud. When talking to our clients, most often I hear it's because they are digitizing their business processes, and the cloud is the foundation for it. Some say it's because of the global availability of the cloud, or its simplicity and ease of use, or it's because of the rich ecosystem of services and capabilities that comes with the cloud. Some clients want to use specific functions in the cloud, like analytics or machine learning and artificial intelligence. But often, the trigger simply is that clients have a need to modernize their current estate so that their IT can cope with rapidly changing business needs and market disruptions. Whatever it is that drives cloud adoption, the move to the cloud is accelerating. Our friends from IDC say that by the end of 2021, based on the lessons learned in the pandemic, most enterprises will put a mechanism in place to accelerate their shift to cloud-centric digital infrastructure and application services twice as fast as before the pandemic. Well, you may say, that's not new to me. Well, I knew all of this before. So what is the link to cloud security then? See, COVID-19 has forced many companies to rush into the cloud without having a proper cloud adoption strategy defined upfront. So let me ask you a question. What's the most common cloud adoption model? What is the de facto standard? I guess you won't be surprised if I'm telling you that's multi and hybrid cloud. When I look at T-Systems clients, there's no single one of them that would not embrace multi and hybrid cloud approach. And again, according to IDC, a Cloud Pulse survey that they conducted in 2019, more than a third of companies purchased 30 plus types of cloud services from 16 different vendors. It should be obvious for everyone that such a distributed landscape can easily lead to unclear ownership of security in the cloud, to policy blind spots, and potential for shadow IT to introduce vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. You may rightfully say that this is an extreme example, but still, you must be aware that adopting a multi and hybrid cloud model leads to increased complexity, and that the cloud comes with its own challenges. In the past, your data center was the center of everything. All your IT systems, your applications, your workloads, they were running in your data center, usually behind a large firewall that you had control over. And if you are honest, security most often was, and sometimes still is, an afterthought. New applications were developed, new IT systems were deployed rapidly, and then security was bolted on somehow afterwards because your security organization told you so. But this is no longer reality in the cloud age. Your systems are highly distributed, and security must be on top of your mind and built in right from the start. Well, let's pause here for a minute and do a first poll. Philip, I think we've prepared a question, which is, how many different cloud service providers is your company working with? So how many different cloud service providers, be it public cloud or private hosting, whatever it is. So how many different cloud service providers is your company working with? So please answer the poll. I think, is it up?
Yes, it's running for around about 1 minute. So, and we will announce when we close it again.
Right, okay. Where can I see the poll? I'm sorry.
You will see the poll in the attendee view, but okay. If you're not, they're already taking part. So.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, perfect. So yeah, if you would be so kind to answer, you know, whether is that 0 because you haven't started your cloud journey, or is that one single provider, or is it many of them? So what is your answer here? I'm really curious to see the answers. Philip, how many people have voted?
We have now 56% and a little bit over 1 minute going. So I will close the poll now. And we will see at the results.
All right, let me just see if I can get that a little bit bigger for me. All right, see, okay, wonderful. So that, I mean, Philip, can everyone see the results?
Yes.
I would think so. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, that should not come as a surprise. So 52% of you are saying I'm engaged with more than four or more different cloud service providers. So it underpins what I just said, right? It underpins that the default model is multi-cloud. It's engaging with several public cloud providers, and that's just natural because you want to benefit from the cloud, and you want to benefit from the different capabilities that the cloud service providers provide. Okay, perfect. Well, thanks a lot for participation in that poll. Quite helpful. All right. Now that we have talked about cloud adoption strategies, let's talk a little bit about threats, because not only is the sheer number of cyber attacks rising and posing a threat to your IT security and your business, but the quality of the attacks is also increasing. Hackers are becoming ever more sophisticated. What you see here on the screen, you're probably aware of the fact that Deutsche Telekom Security are operating a large honeypot estate to provoke and capture cyber attacks. You can view statistics of the honeypot network online in real time. Just follow the link that you see here on the slide. So when I was looking it up last week, more than 67 million attacks were carried out in a single day against the honeypot network. Unbelievable. So the statistics on these attacks show that more than 50% of the attacks were targeting network security, while roughly 1/4 of the cases were to directly take control over a server in the network. And enterprise companies are particularly targeted by hackers. And there are more worrisome statistics. According to an IBM cybersecurity report that they published in 2020, it took companies on average 280 days to identify the breach into their IT estate. Imagine the damage that hackers can make in such a long time. And the same report claims that the average total cost of a data breach in 2020 was $3.9 million US. So you definitely should be aware of the risk that this imposes to your business and to your data security and your privacy. And this is especially true in case you're moving into the cloud. Well, but the cloud is secure, you may say, which clearly is the perception of more and more users. 40% of respondents to last year's cloud threat report from Oracle and KPMG did say so. And that number has doubled in just 2 years. Well, I think they are right. The cloud is secure. But because the cloud is secure doesn't mean your applications and your workloads are secure. It's like buying a safe car, but don't having a driver license. So you need to understand the model of shared responsibility in the cloud, which is the cloud provider takes some responsibility for security, but not all. Your security team maintains also some responsibility for the security of your applications and your data and in your containers and your workloads. Defining that thin line between your responsibilities and those of your cloud provider is imperative for reducing cloud security risks. And now imagine that your application landscape is not running on top of one cloud only. Nowadays, as we have just seen in the poll, data and applications are usually distributed across a couple of public clouds and private clouds and on-premise IT and the edge, for example. Security in such a distributed environment is heavily relying on governance, policies, security best practices. So your organization maturity will dictate what is possible. Do the reality check. I mean, for example, who in your company owns security across on-prem, clouds, and all the application landscapes? And who is the one executing on it? Defining cloud security ownership and establishing cloud security architecture roles, as well as defining security best practices and policies, is crucial for a successful cloud adoption strategy. All right, I think we've prepared another poll, which is who is in charge of cloud security in your company? So again, I would hope that you help us and vote on the question, who is in charge of security in your company? Is it the CEO or is it the CIO? Or have you implemented a CIS or a Chief Information and Security Officer? Or are you probably not sure who that is? Well, I would be interested to learn how that is in your company. So who is in charge of defining the rules and regulations and the policies, and who is in charge of monitoring it, and who owns it? So that's the question. The poll is open. Thanks, Philip, for bringing it up. Really interested to see how that works. Okay. So if you go and select the answer. Oh, here we go. All right. Okay. Well, hey, that's a good result. So almost half of the respondents say the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, is in charge of the cloud security. That's perfect. That's really perfect. I mean, this is really something that we see more often, while in the past, you know, like also here, I mean, it's, what is it, 23% saying, I'm not so sure. Believe me, a year ago or 2 years ago, that was a complete different picture. So it's really good to see that that this is gaining traction. So the awareness is rising, right? Okay. Well, and that's good, because having talked about threats and hackers and cyber attacks, it's obvious. When moving into the cloud, you need to make sure that you have an overarching cloud security strategy at hand. So know your compliance and legal regulations, and be aware of your control points, the identities, the networks, clouds, workloads, applications, and all the endpoints. They need to be secured at any time. So here are some of the best practices I would recommend. Adopt a unified security strategy across your entire IT landscape, regardless whether that is public cloud or private cloud or on-premise or edge. And then define clear roles and responsibilities for security in your organization across application developers, IT operations, and security. And then define and describe applicable rules and regulations for cloud usage. Define it in a set of policies that everybody in your organization must adhere to. Wherever possible, leverage automation as a means to implement repeatable cloud configuration management best practices to secure the entire lifecycle of your application in the cloud. And apply a zero trust model, for example, through strong access management based on least required privileges and multi-factor authentication. And finally, you will need to capture telemetry, audits, logs, and statistics, regardless of which cloud it is, and you'll need to be able to analyze and respond to events in real time. That's why you must deploy appropriate tooling for security monitoring, visibility, and response. And really, I would recommend you engage with the service provider, with an IT service provider like T-Systems, for example, to benefit from their experience and have them helping you define and deploy a security strategy that fits your company needs. So based on what I just said, I mean, Philip, have you prepared another one? I think we have another question, right?
Yes, we have.
There's one more poll, which is on that topic that I just elaborated. The question is, does your company have a well-established, documented, and communicated cloud strategy? And the answer is yes, we have that, or no, we don't have one, or I'm not so sure, which means, well, it's not well communicated or it's not there, right? So whatever it is, we would be interested to learn whether or not your company has a well-established, documented, and communicated cloud strategy. As we have learned in the previous slides, that's really imperative. It all starts with having the appropriate cloud strategy, and that implies the security or includes the security among many other things. All right, interested to see how this works now. Let's see the result. So let me just double check. 45% say yes, my company has a well-established, documented, and communicated cloud strategy, which I think is a pretty good result. So I think the participants in our webinar are well advanced. Yeah, so 43% is a real good result. Close to 30%, 29 say no, we don't have that, and 26% say, well, I'm not sure. Well, okay. Well, thanks for your poll. All right, okay, let's move on then. Here's a client use case I want to share with you. In 2018, T-Mobile Netherlands decided to move into the cloud. By that time, all their IT systems were operated in a data center in The Hague that they owned. They were looking to move out of that data center and to leverage services in AWS and Microsoft Azure instead. As you can imagine, being a mobile operator, security was really on top of their list. So they engaged early with T-Systems. The challenge was to provide end-to-end security across both of the hyperscaler clouds and their on-premise estate during the transformation. For the target estate, T-Systems and T-Mobile cloud and security experts worked together to establish a consistent and harmonized compliance and security foundation for cloud usage. Our consultants and architects developed and deployed standardized landing zones in both clouds based on the highest data protection and security standards of Deutsche Telekom security. These landing zones provide the underlying core configuration. It's like a pre-configured environment that hosts workloads and applications and that takes care of security and compliance, as well as identity and access management, amongst a couple of other things. The benefit of such landing zones is that they ensure consistency across clouds and cloud services and the tenants that operate in the cloud. And they provide a security baseline that preempts non-compliant or unauthorized configurations. In addition, in that case, our experts took the existing processes and made them fit for the usage in the cloud. They also reworked the entire IT compliance and governance framework and helped migrating applications securely into the cloud. Well, meanwhile, a couple of hundred systems are transformed into the cloud. AWS is the primary target platform for application hosting, while Microsoft Azure provides Active Directory services and functions as a hosting platform for Deutsche Telekom security services as an add-on. So the landing zone concept has proven to be highly secure, but also flexible enough to cope with new requirements. For example, a company merger that has been executed after project start was included into the cloud transformation program in an agile manner. All right, well, let me summarize this whole presentation for you. Multi and hybrid cloud is the reality. COVID-19 has accelerated the move into the cloud, and we expect that cloud is not only here to stay, but will become the default model for IT. Cloud is coming with its own challenges, as we have learned. Assess your cloud security readiness and close the gap before starting your cloud journey. And security needs to be built into your cloud strategy right from the start. There is no way you're going to apply security later on in cloud. Implement cloud security best practices such as landing zones, zero trust model, security monitoring, and automated lifecycle and security response in order to minimize security risks. Security and compliance is a shared responsibility between your cloud provider and your security organization. In that model, the cloud provider is responsible for the security of the cloud, while you as a user are responsible for the security in the cloud. Be aware of it. Therefore, assess your security operations maturity before moving into the cloud. Assign clear security policies for cloud usage, and wherever possible, leverage automation to implement repeatable cloud configuration management best practices to secure the entire life cycle of your application in the cloud. And again, let me emphasize that T-Systems is here to help. Reach out. Well, thank you from my side. That's the point where I will be handing over to Duncan from IDC. So Duncan,
hi Thomas.
That's up to you now.
Yes. Thank you, Thomas, and really fascinating poll results that you shared with us there as well. No surprises on the multi-cloud thing that you pointed out. Many thanks to the people who said they were not sure about who owns cloud or whether they have a cloud strategy, because sometimes honesty is the best policy. But hopefully you'll go back to your organizations and work out the answers after the webinar. But thanks for your honesty on that. Very good. So just going to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes or so talking about sort of more high-level market trends in our industry. I guess on reflection, most of us started this time last year with an idea of they might encounter viruses, but probably not looking like this. So it's been quite extraordinary, the shift in cloud adoption and approaches to security in less than a 12-month period. So I trust that we've all learned something about ourselves, about our organizations in the last year or so, particularly about different kinds of viruses. Of course, none of the bad stuff went away. So we saw the Cozy Bear hacking. I'm just trying to move my slides on a bit here. Here we go. Good. So we saw the Cozy Bear hacking attempt on UK coronavirus vaccine, and this has not been an isolated event. We saw Australia being attacked by what they regarded could only be a state-sponsored cyber attack. No prizes for guessing who the main culprit might be in that attack. We also saw a massive rise in ransomware, particularly aimed at small and medium-sized businesses, particularly vulnerable during this past year, and generally an overall increase in cyber attacks during the year. This is a report back in August of last year, and I don't think it let up for the second half of the year either. So, in addition to all the stuff that's been happening around COVID, none of the bad stuff went away. So from a security community point of view, we've really had to double down on spending a lot of time protecting the organization as it was shifting in fantastic speed to new business working models. But I think our message is we shouldn't let this crisis go to waste. And there's a massive opportunity, I think, for security professionals that's been revealed itself in the last 12 months. And so I'd urge you to kind of, really make the best of the opportunity. And I'll explain more about that in just a moment. Let me explain very quickly IDC's road to recovery. So this is a very simple model that we developed quite early on in last year, so around about March of last year, where it became clear that most companies were in the situation of COVID crisis. This is a new thing, really knowing about it. And yet, very, very rapidly, we were going into local and then national lockdowns. And the emphasis there was absolutely on business continuity, keep the lights on, keep us in business. And it really drew attention to very, very basic things like, what's our cash flow like? Do we have enough cash reserves to sustain a 1 month or a 3 month outage or business? So very, very basic things. So then, as you progress through the cycle, there's an economic slowdown where the focus from a business point of view then becomes cost optimization. So we're in business, but my goodness, we do need to restructure our cost base. So a lot of activity on that side happened over the summer. We're now very much in recessionary area where the focus is on this idea of business resilience. How can we adapt our model or business models for the foreseeable future? I mean, there's no end to this. I mean, it's not as if we know when this is going to end. No one has any idea. So your best guess for planning assumptions is first half of the year is going to be pretty much like it was all of last year, but we might be in that position for the whole year. So, you know, really the focus is on being resilient, irrespective of what's thrown at us, lockdowns, travel corridors, travel bans, all that kind of stuff. The focus must be on resilience. Hopefully then at some point, with vaccines and a fair wind, returning to growth, and then out the other side to recovery into what we call at IDC the future enterprise. And the future enterprise will look, I think, quite different to the shape of enterprise as we went into the crisis. So that's our road to recovery. And most companies, if they're lucky, move at some pace from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, but as we've discovered, actually, interestingly, you can move in the other direction as well if things go against you. So how does this help companies? Well, what's interesting is that there's two axes on this curve. There's a left to right in terms of how you progress through the stages, but there's also the top to bottom, which is the depth of crisis that you were in. And what became very clear fairly early on in last year, so from March, April, May kind of time, was that technology was at least part of the solution. It could help you to flatten that curve and help you minimize the degree to which your organization was impacted. But it required quite a different approach, and as Thomas said, a real acceleration to digital transformation. And I really like this quote from Signor Staracci, who's a CEO at NL, and I'll just read it out for you. Whether we are aware of it or not, we're all doing an intensive course in digitalization and learning a lot about our work and about how technology can help us to become more efficient. We're leaping forward 2 or 3 years in terms of our relationship with the digital world. I love that quote because it really nails this aspect of acceleration. And I think actually Signor Staracci was relatively modest in his ambition of the 2 to 3 year term. We've seen some massive acceleration in particular segments, in logistics, in online commerce, in telecommunications, some aspects of telecommunications, where some companies have moved forward nearly a decade in terms of their customer base or the sophistication with which they're having to roll out to preserve their business. So a very, very rapid increase in digitalization. So what did that look like from a security point of view? Well, I think there were we've been through 2 very clear phases in the last 9 or 10 months or so. Very immediately, there was an urgency to secure home workers. As countries went into lockdown and companies sent their employees home, they suddenly realized they'd never done this before, or if they had, it was a very piecemeal and an individual approach. Now they were sending almost their entire workforce home, or at least working from remote locations. And as they did that, they suddenly realized there was a massive security vulnerability. So the security industry largely responded superbly well to that. We've heard stories of VPN rollouts and multi-factor authentication and single sign-on projects that would normally take months to implement, done in a weekend, or certainly in a matter of days. And I think it was a superb example of how quickly security professionals inside companies and the wider community to respond to particular a crisis and to respond to a business emergency. Of course, it wasn't that long afterwards that it was realized, and I think security professionals were quite early to pick up on this, that it wasn't only the work and the workers that went home, it was the data. And so there was a bit of a scurry over the summer in terms of, yikes, what data has left the building and gone home as on laptops? Let's either secure it on a laptop, so disk encryption, that kind of thing, but more optimally, let's get that data off the laptop back into a secure location, but a location where we can all use it. So that really meant, in most cases, some variant of the cloud. So that really drove the cloud acceleration that we saw over the summer. And the imperative then, from a security point of view, is irrespective of where the data is, if it's on a laptop, find it more likely in some sort of cloud resource. Okay, suddenly security of the cloud becomes a core competence that we cannot run our business without. So this is no longer a nice to have, or as Thomas said earlier, an afterthought. We've got to start thinking about this as we consider moving to the cloud. So really interesting evolution that we've seen contracted in the last year or so, and we think this is going to continue. So in terms of what the changes to long-term IT strategy is going to be, this is one of our early surveys of the during the COVID period, but there's no sense that this has changed any time in the last 6 or 7 months or so. The big change is a much more aggressive move to cloud. So companies that were not in the cloud are suddenly realizing that they need to be, for all the reasons that Thomas talked about earlier in terms of resilience and uptime and so on. But also, if you were in the cloud, then you accelerated that. So you were condensing 2 or 3 years, according to the quote I gave earlier, condensing 2 or 3 years worth of evolution into months. And this is a common theme that we've seen from many organizations throughout the last year. And I think that will, honestly, I think that will continue. As I say, I don't think there's any end to the situation now. So I think what we're seeing now is more of a strategic move to the cloud rather than perhaps a tactical move that we saw earlier last year. In terms of the overall infrastructure as a service spend, which is just one aspect of cloud, we never saw a substantial drop in any intent to deploy the cloud. In fact, as we saw, there was an acceleration of that. So one of the early surveys that we took was, has this changed over the year? So every 2 weeks, we surveyed our community right across Europe to see, are there changes that we can see in terms of not just cloud, but in fact, frankly, all technology categories. And cloud was the big consistent thing. So no, we absolutely staying on track with our cloud spend, and it's the same right across the region. So no particular downtime expected there. So not surprisingly, we're seeing an uptick in cloud security workloads. So these are when your workloads move to the cloud, we expect security to be there as well. So big increase in cloud security from a workload perspective. And of course, workload isn't the only thing that we're securing. We're securing data and access and collaboration and software as a service and various other cloud features as well. So just on a shade under 16% compound annual growth rate through our normal forecast period. And if you think about the IT industry as a whole growing, if we are lucky this year, around about the 4 or 5%, so cloud is easily outstripping that as we go. Now, what is it that's substantially different about security in the cloud versus security in an on-prem environment? I think this is an issue that really taxes a lot of organizations, because as Thomas says, I think the consensus is that security in the cloud is actually greater than you can achieve in an on-premise environment, at least for the same cost. And so if security is at least as good, if not greater, in the cloud, then why are we not all charging to the cloud? So let me contrast this chart. So note the compound annual growth rate, just a shade under on the 16%. So here's an interesting chart. This is the growth in vulnerabilities that are released by the MITRE organization, and they compile this list every year. These are vulnerabilities that are reported publicly, and the MITRE Corporation just scoops them up, gives them a number, and whacks them in a database. And this is public information if you want to go and have a deeper dig. Vulnerabilities are actually growing at over 20%, 21.5% year on year. And the other thing to note about this is that vulnerabilities are cumulative. So last year, that's just closed, there were 30,000 new vulnerabilities discovered, an enormous rate. I think actually that is a large part to do with the rapid migration to cloud and new technologies, and the speed has actually introduced some vulnerabilities to the broad technology ecosystem. But that's the 30,000 new vulnerabilities, in addition to the 20,000 the year before, and it was 20,000 the year before that, and just a shade under 20,000 before, and you get this enormous database of vulnerabilities that organizations need to know about in order to manage their state and the risk exposure. Now, so that's bad news for everybody. There is some good news though, and the good news is that what you need to be able to do in order to assess your vulnerability to these risks is you need to be able to assess at scale. And it turns out that cloud is really good at scale. So actually, when you're looking at the kind of vulnerability assessment moving to the cloud, it's a marriage made in heaven. The cloud capabilities that exist now, cloud-based capabilities for assessing vulnerabilities, are really quite compelling. So vulnerability assessment is much easier in the cloud because you do have that scale. So it begs the question, if vulnerabilities aren't really so much of the problem, where does the problem lie? So in an on-prem environment, you really need a good handle on the vulnerabilities that your estate is exposed to. In the cloud, that's less of an issue because of the scale of the cloud. But the big issue here is configuration, and Thomas mentioned this earlier. I really want to drill down on this because the configuration of cloud is a skills issue. We talk a lot in security terms about the global skills shortage in security. There's also a skills shortage in clouds, in general cloud skills. But security in the cloud compounds both of those. It's a double whammy. And so you've got a deficit of cloud security skills, which is why you get these misconfigurations. And the misconfiguration of cloud estate is the single most common cause for any cloud-related breach. In fact, it's really difficult to find instances where there's been a genuine breach of security in the cloud that doesn't relate to a misconfiguration. It's really hard. I mean, the numbers of instances where that's been actually the case is probably still in single figures in Europe. It's quite extraordinary. The vast majority are related to these misconfigurations, and it's not surprising, therefore, that in a recent survey that we did, the security misconfiguration is the top answer. And then, in fact, if you look at some of the other, and these are the top 3 answers: lack of visibility into production environments and improper access controls and permissions and so on. Again, just specific examples of broad point. You've got to get your configurations right. So really, that now becomes the core competence in cloud security. It's not so much about understanding vulnerabilities and so on. It's much more about configurations. So let me just leave you with one final slide. And I wanted to go back to our journey to recovery and where we are now. As I said earlier, most of the organizations that we speak to are in this kind of trough. They're in this business resiliency phase. But interestingly, that's the area in which there is a lot of activity in terms of digital transformation. So, we heard earlier that digital transformation is accelerating. It's not just about moving to the cloud. It's about moving your logistics capability to the cloud. It's about redesigning your office workspace, about your customer experience, and so on. A lot of that is focused on digital transformation. But what's imperative now is to build security into that digital transformation. That's the current focus that your organizations need to have. So, so the key question that I want to leave you with is that, do you have the skills, the knowledge, and the aptitude to secure your journey to the cloud? And do you have that internally, or do you need to work with a partner like T-Systems? So with that, I will end. Thanks for your time. I'm going to hand over to Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. So Thomas, if you could grant me access to the presentation. All right.
Can you test it, please, Paul? Should work for you.
Yes. Hold on a second. Right there. Okay. So Duncan, thank you very much for sharing your insights. So very interesting for me. And I think there's some nice aspects that are underlying my points and also the use cases that I brought with me. So first of all, my name is Paul Schöber. I'm working for Deutsche Telekom Security. As product management, I'm looking after cloud and data security. And before we go into the details and a bit more concrete and specific solutions that we're going to show in a little while, I'd like to mention that we're taking security very seriously at Deutsche Telekom. Because, for example, Deutsche Telekom Security is a newly founded company mid of last year to really bring together all the experts with 1,600 experts that are joining forces and bundling know-how to benefit from each other. And we're taking care of the entire group in terms of security, as well as we're providing and developing products and services for the external market. And today I'd like to show our view on cloud security, brought some use cases that show how to benefit from cloud, but without sacrificing security. So in order to do that, okay, just need to use the mouse. That's fine. There we go. In order to do that, we have a look at the evolution of IT, the way into the cloud, of course, some challenges, and then at the end, how to address those challenges. What do we offer? And we start with the evolution of IT. If it would allow me, yeah, okay. Great. So the evolving IT usage, that's the typical path most of our customers, most of the companies are taking. So are we, right? So coming from owned data centers, moving to private cloud, and then moving the way up to public cloud services, and most likely software as a service with Office 365 or Salesforce is the first step into public cloud services. And from there, moving on to the big hyperscaler platforms and even using cloud native tools and services to really benefit from the cloud. And depending on the level and the cloud model that companies are using, the threat landscape is also different. So that means the security solutions also need to be different and to be adapted to the specific needs. So that is a complex world when we talk about cloud security. There's not one solution fits all. And that's why our goal is to support our customers and companies along that path and to provide the best fit in terms of security. And another aspect I'd like to mention is the way how customers or how companies move into the cloud, right? That also impacts security dramatically, because we see a lot of companies when they first start to go into the cloud, so-called lift and shift approach, right? Taking applications, IT systems as a whole, legacy applications, and migrating them to the cloud and making sure they're still running. So that's often the first step. And that requires different security than developing cloud native, using microservices, containers, serverless, for example, and to use the benefits that public cloud, especially hyperscaler platforms, provide to full potential. Now we're coming to the challenges. So I think most of you, if you have thought about cloud security, are familiar with those challenges, but they're still very important to understand in order to take certain measures. So the first challenge is the increased exposure due to the missing perimeter. So looking at the legacy IT, we were able to have a perimeter, which basically is our big walls with just a few doors that are well protected. And we're not able to set up big walls around cloud services because our data is widespread and we use a lot of different cloud services. So it's more about the identity and access management to make sure that only the right people, the employees and partners that are supposed to access the cloud service are able to access. Then we're talking about least privilege principle. And of course, API communication is also a very important topic when we talk about increased exposure. So that means if data and configurations are not in the right place, it's very easy for an attacker to identify those data and steal them, right? So it's no big effort for an attacker to get access to the cloud platforms because per definition they are available from the internet. And that's a big change to the old world, because the attacker had the challenge to first locate the data center, get access to it. And that is not the case for the cloud environment. And the second challenge is the technology itself. And it's definitely impressive what can be done today with cloud, right? So what took months or even years to build up multinational infrastructure can take minutes nowadays with automation. So the speed, the flexibility and scalability, of course, has advantages, but in terms of security, it's making it kind of worse, right? So keeping up the pace and having the transparency that is needed in that fast-moving world is really key to be able to provide a proper security. And also the third one, trust in the cloud service provider, which is a very actual topic at the moment because of the privacy shield and the decision on Schrems 2. How do we protect our data in public cloud environments, in American cloud environments, from being accessed by third parties, by the cloud providers or by foreign governments? That is really a big challenge, and we'll not go into detail today. But of course, that is something which really takes all of our attention at the moment. And of course, also the trust in the entire infrastructure, because it is a multi and hybrid cloud infrastructure, as we've already heard, and in the combination of on-premises installations, but also private clouds. It is a very complex infrastructure, and providing the right manner of security in order for the company to believe in the infrastructure and in the cloud service and build up that trust is really key. And why is it so important to address those challenges? Thomas already mentioned the very secure car, but doesn't help if the driver doesn't have a driver license. And that is exactly the point I want to make and I want to highlight, because it depends still on the company, on the cloud user, to fulfill their responsibility in terms of security. So the bottom gray part, that is secure. We've already heard that, and cloud providers have understood that this is absolutely fundamentally important to secure their infrastructure. And they also provide security tools for cloud users to fulfill their obligations in terms of security. But it's still always the responsibility of the cloud user. And a very interesting reference, in my point of view, comes from Gartner, and they're saying in about 5 years from now, 99% of all errors and all failures will happen in that above magenta colored area. So for us, it's Deutsche Telekom Security. That means we want to help and support our customers to fulfill their responsibility and secure their applications and data in cloud environments. And how does it specifically look when we talk about security on the way into the cloud? Right? We've looked at the evolving IT usage. What does it mean for security in the context of cloud? So the baseline is the cloud transformation, the cloud strategy, setting the right direction, which is fundamentally important to have a structured approach and to build up on top of that baseline. And the next thing, the next level, is to implement that least privilege concept and to really see identity and access control as key when we're moving into the cloud. Because of the missing parameter, it is very important that identity and access control doesn't leave any loopholes. And then when migrating applications and data onto the cloud, already mentioned, transparency and visibility is really key, especially when we move in that kind of pace that public clouds allow us to do, which is a good thing, of course. But having the necessity to that transparency, it's also very important to have that automated, because nobody can take care of it. Nobody is able to do it without proper help and proper solutions to get ahead of all those security and compliance issues. And the next stage, when we talk about multi and hybrid cloud scenarios, so that's a more mature company, right, with a widespread application landscape. And as Thomas already mentioned, of course, customers want to use specific clouds for specific use cases because they have certain advantages. We will have an application landscape that is widespread across different clouds, whether that is public or private. And to protect applications across that multi and hybrid cloud scenario becomes really key when proceeding with the cloud transformation. And then when we think about the last step, when I said using cloud native development tools, using the DevOps methods, development methods, it is important to also adapt security to those needs, which means shift left of security. That is meant with taking the security measures very much at the beginning of the development phase. That's why it's called shift left, and making sure security is implemented right at the beginning and most and foremost continuously across the life cycle. And then as the last step is really protecting the most sensitive data, the crown jewels, right? Across multiple platforms, across multiple databases, of course. And GDPR, for example, also requires companies to prove the measures that have been taken in case of a data leakage. So an audit proof documentation is also something that is very beneficial. So looking at the path of how to implement security in the cloud, of course, it is getting more and more complex as far as we move up, and as far as the cloud maturity is proceeding. But on the same hand, on the same side, the number of options, and of course, it's the number of experts that are an option to address security, but also the number of tools, but also the number of cloud platforms is decreasing, right? So that is why, coming back to the cloud transformation, very important to set the right direction, because afterwards it's going to be very difficult to change that direction. Okay, now coming to the solution. So our offerings, and it's just a smaller outlook of what we offer and of what we sell. But starting with our goal and our promise is to protect every resource, because it's not possible to isolate resources. If you leave out certain workloads or assets without protection, then attackers will find that loophole and move on from there. So we need to protect all the workloads in the clouds, whether that is virtual machines, container, serverless. We cannot make a difference there.
Paul, sorry for interrupting you. Perhaps the last 2 or 3 sentences would be nice to repeat, because the quality wasn't there.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so hopefully with that slide, so starting again with this one. So our goal and our promise is to protect every resource in the cloud and every workload, because we cannot make a difference there. If we leave one out, specific container, serverless, or virtual machines, then attackers will find the weakest spot and use that to work their way forward. So it's very important to protect every resource and every asset on the cloud. The second one is to protect the entire life cycle, right? To shift left, to make sure that containers, for example, are being born secure, rather than checking if the container is secure when it's already running. Then it might be too late, because containers can have only a lifetime of a couple of minutes. So then that's why we need to make sure containers are being born secure. The third aspect is about protecting any cloud. As we've already highlighted a couple of times before, public clouds and private clouds, and the mix of those will be and still are the most important aspect. So having a unified approach, for example, defining policies only once and distributing them across multiple platforms, and having all the information in one place to be able to correlate and to see in the interdependencies if something's happening, is really key. So how do we fulfill our customer promise and our goal? When we have 3 pillars. So the first pillar is about cloud security consulting, laying the foundation, talking about with customers for their individual and their tailored approach, being able to also see, of course, a holistic approach and a broad coverage of different aspects when we talk about cloud security. And consulting, in my point of view, is a very good starting point to make sure that the way into the cloud is structured. And by the way, even existing cloud infrastructures can be analyzed and can be optimized, right? So that's always something that I would recommend, and that's why it's our first pillar. So the second pillar is our managed service. We are a managed security service provider, and there we try to support you along the entire journey. And if we're talking about cloud security, we're especially talking about visibility in the first place, right? So especially if there are already applications and data in the cloud, visibility is the basis for optimization for security measures. So that's always the first answer that we try to give. Where's the data? Is it secured, and is the cloud infrastructure secure? And on top of that, choosing the right solutions, advising on the right solutions, and with our professional services, integrate and configure those solutions to get them up and running. And the third part would be continuous security. And there we have a zero outage principle, right, to operate security solutions for our customers if they don't have the manpower or if they don't have the experts on hand to fulfill the requirements. Then we step in as a service provider and operate that continuously. And one of the focus services in that area is our managed cyber defense with Europe's largest security operations center that Thomas already mentioned, where really experts sit in front of customers' information, of customers' logs, and analyze if attacks happens and have certain individual runbooks to be able to stop the attack and remediate. And now the third pillar, which are the solutions itself, right? We had the consulting, we had our services, and now the solutions. And I've put together 3 use cases, and those 3 use cases can consist of several services and products, and make great sense if they come together. So the first one is, of course, cloud transformation, because security still is the #1 obstacle why companies do not proceed with their cloud transformation. So the fundamentals, and you cannot highlight it enough, is very important. And setting the scene and defining the direction with the cloud transformation with our consulting services, for example, our cloud assessments, but also our cloud security strategy consulting is exactly that use case we're talking about right here. Because it is fundamentally to have security implemented right at the beginning. Because reshaping applications or IT systems after an incident has happened, and then suddenly realize that security measures were not sufficient, is much more costly and takes much more effort than implementing security right from the beginning. And for the cloud starter, we have another part in the toolkit, a more practical toolkit. We have developed a platform as a service repository, so that's a pre-hardened and a best practice example for platform as a services, so that companies can be assured that using those samples helps in order to make sure that only hardened and best secured assets are being used. And one thing is also very important when we talk about cloud transformation, and also right from the beginning, we need to make sure that security is accompanying the business. Because especially in cloud security, it's often the business that needs to take care of cloud security, because they are the ones building the infrastructure or building the application or the IT system. And it's very hard for a separate department to take care of the security. So, of course, the attention is to design the processes in a way that it's not hindering the business. And the second use case is about protecting working from home, right? We've heard Duncan with COVID, and of course, it's dominating our lives, and it also changed the way we work right now. Ourselves are working from home right now, and a lot of companies managed it very well. But in my point of view, there is room for improvement, especially in the long term when we anticipate that working from home will stay with us to a certain extent. So there's no sense in rerouting all the traffic to internet or to business applications to the company's network and then move on to the internet or to the application. That is not efficient and it creates bottlenecks. So having said that, we need to also rethink our security because the way we work has changed and most likely it will stay that way. So basically there are two solutions that can address that. First one is the direct access to internet, right? Allowing employees from their home to directly move to the internet and having the security instance sitting in the cloud, which is a scalable solution and is providing web security services out of the cloud. For example, blocking malicious web pages or identifying malware. And the other one is the traffic and the communication with business applications. And there it's key to have or to be able to granularly control access to those applications to make sure that only those employees that are supposed to access the certain application are really accessing it, nobody else is. And that for a multi and hybrid cloud scenario, which obviously is the case because applications are widespread, and being able to segment those applications to certain user groups is a big benefit. And also it can support the zero trust principle when using the access control for business applications. So those cloud-based security solutions ease the pain, especially when we talk about working from home. And the third and last use case that I've brought is now about protecting native workloads. So with the first use case, we've set the fundamentals. With the second one we just saw, I was talking about the way the employees communicate and how the traffic flow towards cloud applications and cloud platform should look like or could be optimized. And now we're talking about cloud native workloads. So a lot of companies already using hyperscaler technologies, right? Of course, to a different extent, some with a greater extent and with a cloud-first strategy, others are trying to find their way. But that's also what we've heard from Duncan. It will increase, right? Cloud workloads will increase, and compared with or in combination with the speed multi-cloud usage, it is definitely a must-have in the near future to have proper security for that. And the first thing that is there is to make sure that the foundation, the platform, is secured. When we talk about cloud security posture management, we talk about identifying misconfigurations, and that's the #1 priority that we also saw on Duncan's figures. To, for example, identify an AWS S3 bucket that is not encrypted or that can be accessed from the internet, which is per company policy, not allowed, right? You need to have automatic checks on security and configuration of the underlying platforms, and also the possibility to even automatically remediate those issues. And the second building block of protecting cloud native is cloud workload protection. It's also something that Duncan already showed us in his figures, right? So number of workloads will rise, but number of vulnerabilities will rise as well. So having a proper cloud workload protection is really key. And then we're looking, of course, for security for virtual machines, containers, or even serverless, for vulnerabilities, or also control the communication within those cloud environments. for example, within a container environment, to segment, to build logical segments of containers that are allowed and that are in need to speak to one another, and to block communication toward other segments. That decreases the blast radius and also the possibility of an attacker that has made his way into the environment dramatically. So control lateral movement, east-west traffic. And also part of cloud workload protection is the security of the DevSecOps processes, right? Continuous integration, continuous development, ensuring that only images of containers are being used without vulnerabilities, right? With easy to use plugins in repositories that companies use to ensure that we only use containers that are healthy. I already mentioned making sure containers are being born secure. And once again, coming back to the multi-cloud aspect of it, having that for several environments with several different configurations, several administration layers, it is dramatically increasing. So multi-cloud usage is multiplying the complexity, of course. And therefore, we tend to offer as less tools as possible and to have all the information in one place, and only defining policies once and implement them for several cloud platforms. Okay, and last but not least, I think we as T-System have various angles, various perspectives, and deep knowledge that we bring into cloud business, and therefore have a big added value to your cloud projects as well. Because we're not only a strategic partner and developing and building services and products with big hyperscalers for our customers. We of course use them ourselves, which is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, you're not able to talk about cloud security or cloud itself. But we're also offering various cloud platforms, public cloud platforms as Open Telecom Cloud, or private cloud platforms, future cloud infrastructure, only to name two of them. And also we're making sure what Thomas and myself have already outlined, embed security right from the beginning. We have high security and privacy standards that are checked, because all our products, all our services, and whether that is internal use or external for the market, need to proceed with a privacy and security assessment. And by that, we ensure security by design and making sure that everything we offer and we use is well protected. So thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to say thank you, and hopefully I gave you some interesting insights and use cases. And we would absolutely appreciate if you would like to deep dive into certain use cases, or to get to know about other use cases that we have in terms of cloud security, and would be happy if you reach out and have further conversations. So thank you very much. So, and Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Paul. The Q&A session was planned for around about a quarter of an hour ago, so to not stress everyone too much, I would say thank you for your presentation. I think we did a little bit more than just scraping the surface, and we have the possibility to answer every question also afterwards in direct contact, as I heard from Thomas. But perhaps, Thomas, you can offer that yourself.
Yeah, just quickly. So first of all, I would like to thank Paul and also Duncan for their presentation, and of course all the participants for staying on the call. It took a little bit longer than expected. So as Philip said, we offer you, Paul and myself, you see our email address on the screen. You can send in questions if you have one, and we will skip the Q&A now because of the time. Thanks very much. Back to you, Philip.
Yeah, I stay a little bit longer online just so you have the time to take over the email addresses. But yeah, also from my side, it was very interesting, and I thank you very much for giving such good insights. I will close the webinar in about 10 seconds, I think, and I wish you everyone a very, very nice evening, and stay healthy.
Thanks
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.